Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We're learning Mishnah Yisukkah, Perek Beis, Chapter 2, Mishnah Ches, Mishnah 8. Nashim Avadim Uktanim, women, Gentile slaves, and minors, P'turim min HaSukkah, are exempt from the mitzvah of Sukkah. When it comes to women, it's interesting. The starting point of discussing why a woman would be exempt from the mitzvah of Sukkah is because of the fact that it's a mitzvah saseh shazman grama. That means a positive commandment that is performed during a specific time. Meaning it's only done during Sukkot. That's when the mitzvah of Sukkah is. So a positive commandment that is only done during a specific time, women are exempt. And whatever the law is by women, avadim, Gentile slaves, follow the same pattern. That would be the starting point of where we would say that women are exempt. But the Baratanura brings on a pasuk, a verse that exempts a woman from the mitzvah of Sukkah. And that's because that actually would be another reason to obligate them to sit in the Sukkah. That's because we have another source that actually compares the first night of Pesach and the first night of Sukkot. And we apply certain things from Pesach to Sukkot. So for instance, the first night of Pesach, you have an obligation to eat matzah. You have to eat matzah the first night. You have to have bread in the Sukkah the first night. So one might think that the same way women are obligated to matzah, which they are, even though it is time-bound, and that's because we have a source to tell us that whoever has the prohibition of eating chametz has the obligation to eat matzah. And since women have the obligation to eat, they have the prohibition against eating chametz, therefore they are obligated in matzah. And once women are obligated in matzah, I might think that now they should be obligated in eating in the Sukkah. Therefore, there is a verse that specifically exempts them from the mitzvah of Sukkah. So that's the end of the day, the explanation as to why women are exempt. Avadim follow the same pattern as women. And then you have katanim, you have minors. Children under bar mitzvah are going to be exempt. But now the Mishnah is going to qualify that, because the Mishnah says, Katan she'ein tzarech li'imai, a minor, a child. Again, we're talking about a male child. Obligated to be in a sukkah. Now, let me read to you how this is explained. Once a child is mature enough to perform a particular mitzvah, in general, his father is rabbinically obligated to have him do the mitzvah. This is the obligation known as chinuch, training. The level of required maturity varies from one mitzvah to another. With regard to the mitzvah of sukkah, a child must be old enough not to need his mother. That's what it means. A child that's old enough not to need their mother, the father has to make sure they eat in the sukkah. That is, the child is sufficiently mature. When he wakes up, he does not call his mother repeatedly until she comes. Rather, he calls and then waits quietly for her. That already at that age, the child is considered mature enough to be in the sukkah. Only a child of this age need be trained to dwell in the sukkah, because a younger child could not sleep there without his mother. It's not going to work. So therefore, he's not old enough yet to be in the sukkah. However, once he is old enough to be in the sukkah, the father is obligated to make sure that he's in the sukkah. Now, the Mishnah continues with a story where we actually find that someone did this for a very, very young child to make sure that they're eating that they're in the sukkah. Maisa, it occurred v'yalda kalasei shal Shammai Hazaken, that the daughter-in-law of the Shammai Hazaken, the elder Shammai, the first Shammai, his daughter-in-law gave birth, and it was Sukkos. Upiches asamaziva. That means he removed the plaster from the roof over her bed. V'sichach al gabi hamita, and he puts, but for the child. So here they explain, according to Shammai the elder, the obligation of training chinuch applies even in the case of a child who is not. It's an infant, right? It's an implication is she gave birth. That this is a very, very small child. Child's not aware. Nonetheless, Shammai is not held. You still have to train them. As soon as he becomes capable of performing the mitzvah, which in the case of sukkah requires only sleeping and eating, we must arrange for him to do so. Shammai Hazaken took it as far as an infant, as a baby. The baby, if at the end of the day, are they capable of performing the mitzvah? Can they eat and sleep in the sukkah? Yes, they can. Now, and therefore, he held that you have to arrange it for them. I don't believe this is necessarily the halacha, because if the child's not even aware of what's happening, there may not be a mitzvah of the mitzvah of chinuch when it apply. Shammai seem to hold that there was. Now, does Shammai disagree with the? It would seem. I mean, I can't say for sure, but it would seem that he disagrees with the what was mentioned in the beginning of the Mishnah about whether the child needs his mother or not. Right? The Mishnah said before, a child who doesn't need his mother is a child that the father has to make sure it's in the sukkah. Well, this child definitely needed his mother. Nonetheless, Shammai still held it has to be in the sukkah. That's because according to Shammai held that once the mitzvah could be done, you have to train them. Next Mishnah, Mishnah Tes. Kol Shivas Hayamim, all 7 days of Sukkot. Adam Isa Sukasai Keva, a person makes his sukkah his permanent dwelling, Ubeisai Arai, and his house his temporary dwelling. How does that manifest itself? That is the same way in your house. You eat, sleep, and relax. And if you have beautiful utensils and linens in your house, right? If you have them hanging around in your house, you bring them into your sukkah. It means you should live in your sukkah as you do in your house. You do the activities in the sukkah as you would in your house, and you decorate it as you would your house. Yarduk Shamim. Let's say it rains. Me'emasai muter lafarais. At what point can you leave the sukkah? That means the Mishnah isn't even talking about why you're exempt. The Mishnah is assuming you're exempt. It wants to know, when does the exemption take place? How much does it have to rain for you to say that now you leave the sukkah? So first of all, the derivation that if it rains you would leave the sukkah is because the Torah requires that our dwelling in the sukkah resemble our dwelling in the house. If rain was leaking into someone's house, he would leave and eat and sleep elsewhere. Right? If there's a leak inside your house, you move away, you move out, you move away from that place. And therefore, if the water is leaking into your sukkah, it's going to be the same thing. The same thing applies. This is called mitzvah. Mitzvah means you're suffering. You're suffering, and it would be a situation that you would leave your house, so you can leave your sukkah. If let's say there's a swarm of mosquitoes, right, that comes into your sukkah, you're also exempt from eating in the sukkah, because if a swarm of mosquitoes got into your house, into your dining room or kitchen, you'd move out, you'd move away from it if you could. And therefore, if you can protect yourself, that's what you would do. So therefore, any kind of mitzvah, any kind of suffering like that, we say you're exempt from the sukkah. That is what exempts you from rain. So now the question is, at what point can you leave? And the answer is, Mishatisrach hamikva, mikvah. That, not mikvah, mikvah, right? When the rain is hard enough that a porridge would be ruined, right? Porridge is not liquid and not solid, and rain messes your porridge. You know that? And especially if it's made out of split beans, a certain kind of bean called a split bean. If it's made, and apparently that was a common bean that was used then. And if a porridge is made out of that, the rain ruins it even quicker than another porridge. So the point is, so I'm going to read to you again here from the notes. Porridge is easily ruined by rain, and a porridge of split beans is ruined even more easily than other kinds of porridge. If enough rain is falling in the sukkah to ruin split bean porridge, even a person who is not actually eating this dish is exempt from the mitzvah. Let's say you're not eating split pea porridge, right? So the rain's not necessarily ruining your food. But the point is, if it's that amount of rain, that already is amount of rain that it is distressing to eat any food. If it hits that point, even if it's going to ruin your food, it's distressing. But that's how Chazal, our sages, measured it. Measured it by, would it ruin your food? That specific food. If it would, then the halacha is you can leave the sukkah even if you're not eating that specific food. Mashlu mashal. The sages gave a parable to this kind of situation. The situation that it's raining in your sukkah and you have to leave. What is it comparable to? To a servant who came to add water to his master's cup. Meaning, the times of the Mishnah, wine was very strong. You had to dilute it with water. And therefore, they used to bring wine to the table, and then they had water to dilute it. Now, let's say there's a servant, he works for someone, and he's going ahead and he brings he's bringing the pitcher of water to dilute the wine. And what is his boss do? He takes it and throws it in his face. Okay, he takes the pitcher and he throws it in the servant's face. What is that a sign of? Shalom, right? Not interested in you being here right now. Not interested in your service. If it rains on Sukkot, that's the same idea. That's the Rebbe Shalom telling us he's not pleased with our performance of the mitzvah. He's not interested in our service. Chas v'shalom. And that's what it's a sign of. Similarly, when Hashem brings rain on Sukkot and forces us to leave the Sukkah, he shows that he's not pleased with our service. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Of course, it doesn't. It's not.